We are a couple of minutes officially behind, but we'll go ahead and start due to having some last minute communications. But anyway, since we are pretty much in formal operation here, we do need to rearrange our agenda to a degree, reorder our agenda to a degree. We do expect the mayor and the chief of police to join us shortly, and we'll rearrange at that particular time. And anyway, we have Miss Jones and Miss Hoosler who've already joining us. And informally, can we by consent go ahead and agree to rearrange the agenda? Any opposition to that? All right, not hearing any, we'll do it that way. And so consider ourselves called to order. Introductions. I'm Pastor Leon D. May the first, and one of the co-chairs of our committee.
I'm Thea Agnew-Bemba, and I'm one of the other co-chairs of the committee.
Joan Ryan with Enlaces on the State of Alaska.
Lori Pickett with Alaska Literacy Program.
Hi, this is Cameron Perez Verdia with the Anchorage Assembly, and just for the guests here, it's a more of a casual meeting, so we use first names and all sit at the table. I think it's helpful.
All righty.
Barb Jones, Mayor's Office.
Matthew Hurt, Legislative Counsel to the Assembly.
All righty, thank you. And then those of you, Jazz, okay.
Jasmine Akers, Deputy Clerk and staff to the committee.
All right, thank you so much. All right, online, we have Hannah. Oh, who? Felix.
Hey everyone, Felix Rivera, Anchorage Assembly.
And Taylor.
Hi everyone, happy Thursday. This is Taylor.
All righty. Glad to have you all. We'll entertain now our land and labor acknowledgement. Do we have a volunteer for that? All right. Okay.
We acknowledge that the land that now makes up the United States of America was the traditional home, hunting ground, trade exchange point, and migration route of more than 574 American Indian and Alaska Native federally recognized tribes and many more tribal nations that are not federally recognized or no longer exist. We recognize the cruel legacy of slavery and colonialism in our nation and acknowledge the people whose labor was exploited for generations to help establish the economy of the United States. We honor Indigenous, enslaved, and immigrant peoples' resilience, labor, and stewardship of the land, and commit to creating a future founded on respect, justice, and inclusion for all people as we work to heal the deepest generational wounds.
All righty, thank you, Joan, for sharing the land and labor acknowledgement. And at present, we'll move to new business, so to speak, so that we won't have a major interruption with our unfinished business. And do we have any new nominations for new members? All right, not hearing any. And we'll just follow on in that order. And any committee updates? Joan, you have an update? Anybody? Committee updates? Anyone?
Hola, everyone. So we have coming up in September a women's conference, 100% in Spanish from 9 to 12:30 at the Denina Center. It's only $20 and it's going to be super awesome. We have our annual Fiesta fundraiser also that day from 6 p.m. to 12 a.m. It's a platter dinner, performance, fiesta, DJs, etc. Please come. Then October 4th, we have a really, really good exhibition at the museum called Our Footprint, or Nuestra Huella in Spanish. It will feature all the contributions of Latinos since Alaska became a state. We will have dances, food, and a lot of fun. And then October 12th, we will have our health fair, Feria de la Salud, at Our Lady of Guadalupe. That's in the morning. And this is all for Hispanic Heritage Month. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Joan. And it seems like you guys are full chalked coming out of September and into October. Good. All righty. Anyone else? Any member updates? All right, not hearing any, then we'll move to handle some more of our new business as it relates to this. We are yes. Do what now? Okay.
And Issa just joined if you wanted. Issa just joined.
All right.
And Heather.
All right.
Your camera to come on, it'd be great. Just your face too, if you can.
Issa, would you like to introduce yourself for the evening? And then we'll have Heather.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's Patrasano, State Refugee Coordinator. Thanks.
This is Heather Ireland with Anchorage School-Based Health Centers. It's a busy time with back to school. Sorry, I can't be there in person.
All righty. Thank you guys for joining in. Appreciate it. And we'll move on now. And our agenda calls for nominating of co-chairs going forward. This is the time that we actually do that in August going forward. And so we'll open the floor for nominations for co-chairs. But prior to doing that, we did have a discussion previously about how we wanted to do that. So we might want to talk about, first of all, the charter. We're supposed to review and update our committee charter, and I did not. I intended to get me a printout of that, and I did not print it for myself. But does anybody have anything they would like to recommend as it relates to charter and updating the charter? One of the things that we talked about in the prior meeting was relative to this particular item, the co-chairs item. Either we remain having co-chairs going forward, or we do a chair and a vice chair. And so what are the wishes of the committee? Anyone?
Maybe just to, share some experience and also just kind of thoughts about what we might want to do going forward. So the way Pastor May and I have done this for the last couple of years is to basically just trade off each meeting. And sometimes we don't trade off, and we just kind of work it out. And I think that's nice because all of us we facilitate differently. We do different things, and it's cool to have that difference in the community, in the committee, in my opinion. One of the things that Pastor May and I also talked about, though, is that right now what's happening is we've been co-chairs for 2 years, and that's the limit we set in our charter. So now we're both going off at the same time. So an option could be when we elect 2 new co-chairs, if that's how we want to do it, that one of them is really just serving for 1 year and the next for 2, and then we'd get on a more staggered sequence going forward. So that could be a good idea. And then in terms of a chair and a vice chair, Pastor May, do you want to speak to that a little bit? Like, are you thinking like the vice chair would become the chair the next year? Just talk a little bit about what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I had not thought about whether or not the vice chair would become the chair in the next, or if it would be a complete trade-off every 2 years. But my thought on it was that the chair would give leadership to the committee with collaboration with the vice chair as needed. But one person would be consistently running the meetings, except for a time when that individual may need to be absent and the vice chair would step up to the plate. Those were just my initial thoughts on it. So, but it's the wishes of the committee. If you'd like the stagger, the chair and the co-chair as far as years, or if you would like the chair and vice chair model, whatever you may like. Anyone would like to speak to it?
I like the co-chair with the staggered rolling off. And I think that usually provides more support just to make sure you've got it staggered. But I think that when you're co-chairing, you two have a beautiful relationship and that works out really well. I think it depends on who is stepping up for those roles as to how they feel. That's
Okay. So Ms. Lori likes the staggering of the co-chairs. Anyone else like to speak to that? Okay, thank you. Issa?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I think this is an important conversation when we have to visit. I also am interested in what we think the timeline is for the previous meeting we had about a change anyways, that's inevitable. And just wanting to make sure, like how much it is that we should focus on figuring out these logistics if there's an inevitable change coming 2 months from down the road, 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, or if we even have any idea of what that timeline is.
Right. And just by way of an answer, as of right now, I don't have any idea of that timeline, but I do have the idea that going forward until such a change is in place, we still would need to function as we are. And so we would do what we need to do in that regard going forward. And then at such time as a change is made, then we'd address that then, would be my thinking. But we may have an opportunity to ask that question a little later in our meeting. Cameron?
I think that was my sort of point as well, is that yeah, the structure of the committee may change, and in terms of, or the function of it, and the roles and that sort of thing, and so that may affect how you decide about how the co-chairs are structured. But yeah, so that was the only point I was going to make, is that in the discussion of shifting into a sort of a different model, how that might change in terms of the role of the co-chairs and or chair, and how they would work, for instance, with the chief equity officer and so on. So it may be worthwhile to change, and then but be prepared to adjust depending on what decisions you make in the future.
Thank you, sir. And that was exactly my thinking, that when the change is necessitated, we'll make the change and keep it moving. And so as of right now, we've heard from Ms. Lori and Ms. Issa. Anyone else? Go ahead.
I guess I would also speak in favor of the co-chair model. I think maybe I'm just kind of biased towards co-leadership, but that's how I run my business. I've got 4 other owners that we're all equal partners, and I think there's a lot of value to it. And I think it actually is kind of revolutionary a little bit, because it's not all up to one person and then everyone's below that person. It's more shared. And that means it's maybe like not as efficient and can be awkward sometimes, but I feel like that's 100% worth it. So, but I do agree that staggering the terms would be beneficial. So that's just my opinion.
Okay. Anyone else? Taffy.
Yeah.
Hello, Taffy. Would you like to say good evening? Can you hear us, Taffy? All righty. He's not tuned. She's not tuned in at the moment, and So we'll keep it moving. So not hearing from anyone else relative to that, I'm assuming that all are well with what has been discussed relative to the models of the staggering of the co-chairs and what have you. And so at this particular point, we'll entertain a motion to so do.
I make a motion.
It's been moved by Joan, seconded by Lori, that we move to the staggering of the co-chairs going forward. And any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not hearing any opposed, then we'll go forward with the staggering of the co-chairs going forward, which would necessitate making a change in our document to facilitate that. And if I may, maybe we could come back in our next meeting with that documentation, recommendation of documentation, and get it going forward from that point on. But as of right now, we've approved keeping the co-chair model and staggering the co-chairs so that somebody would always be on board for one who is incoming. All righty. Thank you ever so much for that.
I apologize. Toffee is texting me that she can't hear anything, and that's why she didn't respond.
Oh. There's nothing I can do about that one. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that's been happening in meetings, especially Teams, is when somebody has an AI assistant in, it's interfering sometimes with other members that join.
Oh.
It's happened in a couple meetings I've been in.
Okay.
Should we kick out the?
All right. If the AI assist is corrupting our meetings to a degree, then maybe we need to kick out the AI.
I'm a Zoom person, so I don't really know. I just know that that's what I'd heard in other Teams meetings.
Okay.
Has anybody else? No? Okay.
No, but I can kick it out if you'd like me to.
Yeah. Yeah. If that's interrupting, I would say so. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All righty. Thank you for that. All right. So is everybody good with? Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to share, since we've got the chief here, did we want to rearrange it again or no? Are we good? Did we want to rearrange so that we hear from the chief now while he's here?
Well, I was kind of depending upon your time frame. We don't want to infringe upon it so much, but I was kind of waiting on the mayor to show up so that we could kind of go forward with those things in conjunction. And yeah, may not get them together.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know. Thank you for that. And so we'll go ahead so as not to infringe upon too much of the chief's time.
I think Barbara Jones might have some information. What do you have any information about the arrival of the mayor?
I think the mayor was planning to be here from 4:45 to 5. She did have a 4 to 5 o'clock. She was trying to leave early. I did text her as soon as the chief got here, though, to let her know that he was here. So, but I haven't gotten a response. So.
Okay, so just to bring everybody up to speed, what we were attempting to do on this evening in this meetings with the mayor and the chief of police is in regard to the shootings and loss of life at our community. We've had 6 shootings and I think 4 deaths, if I'm not mistaken, and the latest being Easter LaFayette, 16-year-old young one with a loss of life. And so I guess my interest, I don't know about anybody else on the committee, but my interest was relating to the forward moving plans of the mayor and the administration and the chief. I heard a little bit about it in addition to what was put out over the news. I heard a little bit about it in the meeting on yesterday, but did have a few questions, and maybe others have some questions that they have relative to it all as well, as it relates to the rollout, the forward-moving plans and what have you. There were some items that were listed there. One was investigations, the other community involvement, and thirdly, departmental changes at APD and what have you. And relative to, and maybe the attorneys can help with that, relative to the investigations, it stated that there's going to be an internal investigation of the August 13 incident completed by a third-party investigator, and then further states that the Alaska's Office of Special Prosecutions, OSPE, will be doing a criminal investigation of the incident to determine whether criminal charges are warranted and that kind of things. And I guess one question I have relative to these two investigations, what's the major difference? One I know is internal and not necessarily criminal. I get that. I understand that. But what's the major difference? What is the end result, the end game of the internal investigation versus the criminal?
Absolutely. So I know I've been to this meeting before and we're a little bit more informal, so I'm gonna stay on that track with you, okay? So if you want, I can explain kind of the timeline, because that's also helpful. I was talking to Alaska News Source last night, and there was a lot of
And that'll be
confusion.
another question, so go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what happens at the time of an officer-involved shooting is we treat that just like any other homicide investigation. So homicide detectives come out, crime scene team comes out, we bring witnesses back to the station. So no matter if they're officers or members of the public, bring them all back to the station. Obviously, the involved officer that fired their weapon gets transported back to the station. So we have a supervisor grab them, and their car stays on scene, and they're and everybody's separated. So our witnesses are separated again, whether they're officers or members of the public, and then the officers involved are also separated. And so the criminal investigation starts at that moment in time. Our witness officers, we generally get statements from all of our witness officers as well as our civilian witnesses that night or that day. They kind of stay at the station until all those interviews are done. The involved officer has the opportunity to provide statements or not, just like anyone that's under a criminal investigation. Generally, we see those officers involved come back and provide a statement, usually within 72 hours. They're still on their mandatory administrative time off, so they're not back in the field until a couple of steps have taken place. And that investigation is simply to investigate whether or not there was a crime committed by the officer in using deadly force, or if the subject that the officer fired upon, if they are alive, if there was a crime, if they committed a crime. So in 2 of our 6 officer-involved shootings, the person that we shot but survived are being charged with felony crimes, 1 homicide and 1 3 counts of a felony assault. So they're investigating both of those sides at the same time. Obviously, if the person that we shot is deceased, they're not investigating them for any crimes they committed, because there's no chance of prosecution. So that investigation takes place in conjunction with Office of Special Prosecution. The detective team will put together all of the case information. So the videos, the audios, the evidence, everything crime scene collects, all the witness interviews, all the involved officer interviews, and they put it together in a big package and they send it over to the Office of Special Prosecution. The medical examiner has a role to play. They're in charge of their piece of the investigation, so they will do the autopsy, and then they'll determine if there are any other like chemical tests that need to be run. So like if they feel it's necessary to do like a tox screen, that's up to the medical examiner's office. They'll turn all that information also over to the Office of Special Prosecution. And then if there's any ballistics that needs to be run, that goes to the state crime lab and they run those ballistic tests. And that also gets turned over to the Office of Special Prosecution. They take all of that information and determine whether or not they are going to do a declination letter, which means they will essentially declare that there's no crime that's been committed. That's what you have seen recently with some of our other officer-involved shootings. Or they can decide to take the case if they think there is a reason to move it forward in the criminal path. They can take it to a grand jury, and then a grand jury looks at all the evidence and determines whether or not they're going to move forward with an indictment. And then that criminal process, if there's an indictment, moves along the criminal process track. So trial and discovery and all that sort of stuff. Once that is complete, so for simplistic sakes, I'll say let's assume we get a declination letter on an officer-involved shooting. That ends the criminal process. And once that letter is done, or once that letter is drafted, that allows us to conduct an administrative investigation. Several years ago, the Attorney General's office sent a memo out to all police agencies in the entire state and said that we could not start our administrative investigation until the criminal was complete. That starting the administrative investigation could grant some immunity to the subjects of the criminal investigation, which obviously would mean that the criminal case couldn't go forward if we did that. So we don't start the criminal investigation until the administrative investigation until criminal is done. The difference is the administrative investigation, there is no choice on the part of the employee. The employee is compelled to participate in that process. They have to provide a statement. They have to cooperate in everything we want them to do as a condition of their employment. And at the end of that review process, they can be disciplined up to and including termination if we find grounds that they violated a policy. And if that policy violation was significant enough to terminate, obviously we'd go to termination, or lesser if the violation was a lesser policy violation. So those are the two independent investigations. Now, that administrative investigation, once it starts, so once we get that declination letter, again, for the simple explanation here, we only have 45 days to complete that investigation. Don't confuse the 45 days with our video camera release policy, which also uses the 45 days. Two totally separate things. This is just a contractual requirement between the Anchorage Police Department and the Anchorage Police Department Employees Association to complete an administrative investigation in a timely manner. That's a 45-day window. So when we talk about hiring somebody from outside of APD or the municipality to conduct that administrative investigation, we have to make sure that they can come in at an unknown date, because we don't know if I knew today that OSP was going to be completed with whatever they were going to do on September 1, then we could hire somebody to come in September 1 and start that process. But we don't know what their timeline is. So we have to hire somebody that has a movable time frame to where they can come and start their investigation in very short order once OSP concludes their investigation. Because if it takes them a month to start that administrative process, they only have 2 weeks left. And that's a very short time to complete an administrative investigation. So that's one of the challenges with having someone from outside the police department do that investigation.
So basically, what I'm hearing is the information gathered internally is what is submitted to OSP, and their investigation will be piggybacking on the back of what you guys have done internally.
Yeah, so the criminal collection of all the evidence and information is done by the Anchorage Police Department. Now, the Office of Special Prosecution is involved in that whole process. So they're overseeing that entire investigation. And, so if they see something that they think we should be collecting, or questions that we should be asking, or things like that, they are there at the time that the entire evidence collection and interview process is happening. So they have the ability to interject at any point in time and say, hey, you need to ask these 5 questions to this witness or this, So we want to make sure that we give them everything they need to make their determination on whether or not it's a criminal offense or not.
Okay, so the outside investigator that was mentioned a minute ago, is that solely administrative?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So in other words, the statement being made here that the internal investigation of the August 13 incident will be completed by a third-party investigator. And I'm thinking in terms of that being in deference to an internal.
That is the internal administrative investigation. That's referring to.
Okay. So it will be done by someone other than police officers.
Correct.
Okay. That's what I was getting at, because I'm thinking earlier that if it's done by officers, then they're kind of investigating themselves, so to speak. So this would eliminate that.
Correct. That's the purpose of having an outside vendor, if you will,
Okay.
have involvement in that process.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
I'm trying to separate the different pieces here because I think there's a lot going on. So first of all, Office of Special Prosecution is not part of the Anchorage Police Department, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So Office of Special Prosecution is a separate agency, state agency, yes?
Correct.
Right. So some people may consider that an external review, right? But that's typically what happens is the state investigates it, right? And so then there's an internal process that AP does within themselves, right, to collect information and collect that sort of thing. And then the third thing that we're talking about, though, is that the mayor has called for a third party investigation that's not the Office of Special Prosecution and it's not APD, but someone else is hired and managed through the municipal attorney's office to do a review so that we have another independent look into this. And so that's kind of a third view of what's going on. I don't know if that helps, but
yeah, well, I was going to get to that third view. Thank you, Cameron. I was going to get to that third party comprehensive review, so to speak, of the training, tactics, supervision, and make recommendations. And so that third party is, to me, distinctively different from the other two. And if recommendations and all of those things are going to be made after a comprehensive review of the whole process of training, tactics, supervision, and all of that. So then I guess my question is, maybe that hadn't been determined yet, but who, when, and what timeline?
So the external review of like training and policy, that sort of thing, independent of the administrative investigation, because there's two outside hires essentially that we're going to do. That is going to follow a little bit longer procurement process. So that's going to have to go through probably an RFP process. That takes a little bit of time. And then once a vendor is selected, they have a lot of material to review to determine, they're going to look at training, they're going to have access to training records, videos that we use in training and our policies, and they're going to look at that material. And then they are going to do essentially a findings documentation where they're going to make recommendations and talk about deficiencies that they found that we need to correct. That process, although that's going to take some time, we started that process internally July 1. So we already started implementing change and reviewing things within APD already. So we're not waiting for some sort of external process before we start to address some of the issues. It is our goal that whenever this group is selected, that we will be able to hand that person a document that we've created that has what we believe is our deficiencies and areas that we need to improve on. And so they'll have that as part of their documentation as well. And primarily the reason why we want to do that is we do want to get started early, but we also want to be able to, show to the public that their final document is going to look pretty similar to our final document. So that's kind of the plan.
Okay, so you guys are doing it at the same time, and then you hand it over to them, and then they'll do it again and look at what you have and come up with what they come up with on top of that. But are we to assume that the recommended changes are going to be implemented?
You can make that assumption that, generally a very high percentage, unless it's not feasible or, it comes at a high economic cost and we don't have the funding to do it or something, but generally you can assume that the recommendations in these types of reports are going to be implemented.
And I noticed as a part of this, you're assigning a new captain to some of this to work it all out, and all of that is what I gleaned. And there was a line in there that I had a question about. Under that third part, it said the outside entity will not limit its analysis to what is legally permissible, and that the other investigations have to, I guess, go along those legal lines and all of that. What is legal, what they can do, those ramifications, what they can, and that kind of thing. What does that really mean? Not being limited to that which is legally permissible.
So an example would be we have a policy that does not allow choke holds or carotid holds. That is legally permissible to use. There's no law against that federally or in the state. If an officer has to use deadly force, there's nothing that prevents them from doing that. Now, in our policy, we have added that to our policy. So that would be a limitation that's outside of legal limitations.
Okay, and well, if
I
okay.
do have a question when you're done.
Okay, good. Another thing relative to those changes and looking at all of that and implementing those, I guess I have a major question about rules of engagement, and possibly, I guess that'll be part of what will be looked at relative to those making changes and all of that, if necessary. When I think in terms of rules of engagement or even rules of disengagement, and maybe you have some of those as well, but is that part of what is going to be looked at? Because I think in a lot of these instances, those rules of engagement to some degree probably need to be overhauled. And so is that part of what will be looked at as far as training and what have you?
I generally don't use that term in the way you're using it, but yes, part of what would be reviewed would fit into the category as you're explaining it.
Yeah. Because I think relative to specifically this last incident, the rules of engagement or disengagement or what have you probably could, in my opinion, may have been a little better. Not to place blame anywhere or anything like that, because I know things still have to come out and all of that. But when you have a 16-year-old with a knife, and I don't know any of the particulars or any of that, but just John Q. Public, and that's what I'm hearing a whole lot of, in terms of it. I'm not expecting you to answer this, but in terms of what transpired, people are wondering why could not taser have been used? Why could not pepper spray, mace have been used? I would even suggest a billy club, or even the dog that was supposedly outside, bringing the dog in as a threatening force to say drop the knife or whatever. But there seemed to have been another number of options that possibly could have been available, CIT, MIT, or even a SWAT team negotiator, or and I don't know how true that is, fact-based, but even one of the family members saying, let me talk to her, and the officer said no, that kind of thing. And all of this, mind you, for me, is hearsay, but it just, I don't think we ought to presume the ignorance of John Q. Public when all of these questions that they have relative to what could have happened relative to a loss of life. And so that's why I really lift the rules of engagement and or disengagement, maybe even a backing off and a cooling off period. A whole lot of things could have transpired, and everybody can talk about woulda, coulda, shoulda. But I'm just raising those as possibilities for being looked into as we're talking about rules of engagement and or disengagement. So that's just some insight. Go ahead, Thea.
Actually, I feel like my question's not well enough formed in my head for me to really articulate it. So maybe are there other committee members that want to either just share kind of some thoughts or have questions that they'd like to share with Chief Case? Oh, Lori does. Sorry, she's right under my nose.
Thanks so much for being here. I know this has got to be really hard. It's hard on all of our community. Is there thinking forward on what we do to dive deep into rebuilding trust with the community and hearing from the community what they need to be able to start rebuilding that kind of trust?
I think that's a two-part question I'll answer. If you know we have a significant incident, and so let's for a second let's put that aside and just talk about had these incidents not happened. I believe there still is an opportunity to increase trust and collaboration and engagement with the community. So and that is the top priority. It's one of the reasons why you see my face in the media all the time, because we have a lot of information that we have in front of us. And generally, over the last couple of years, you haven't seen a lot of that information go out to the public. And so then we get to assume what the police department's doing and why they're doing it and how they're doing it. And I don't want the public to assume. I would prefer that we just, right or wrong, agree or disagree with what we're doing at a bare bones minimum. We put out what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it. And so that's one perspective. We also have a lot of communities throughout Anchorage that has seen where we can improve the relationship. So, when you think about some of the things that have been happening throughout the state of Alaska over the last couple of years, or really the last decade, that has not really made its way into mainstream criminal justice systems. So it's, for example, restorative justice concept. The restorative justice concept is not a main kind of traditional criminal justice system response, but our Alaska Native population has been exploring that and using that for a very, very long time. And how can the police department engage in those types of responses? Well, that requires us to build a different relationship with, when talking about restorative justice, traditionally Alaska Native population. We also have just a very large immigrant population within Anchorage. And so relationship with our immigrant population, which English is their second language, or their ability to speak English, they don't speak English. The culture that they bring to Anchorage, the relationship or the view that they have of the police department that they bring from the country that they come from, and how we can interact to make sure that we're kind of addressing the kind of natural barriers that exist just because they're coming from one culture to another. So it's a little bit different approach to try to think about, instead of us responding for calls the exact same all the time, to shift our mindset to understanding that we may be having contact with somebody that has a completely different impression or expectation of the police department, because we're going to get less cooperation if we view everyone the same, knowing that they come into it with different views. So that's kind of irrelevant of any major incident, and those are investments that we've already started making and will continue, and that's not an investment that happens overnight. Now, when you have a significant incident, now we have to be focused on the challenges that that incident caused. There also is a cultural component to this particular incident as well, and so we have to be responsive to that component. And it really requires the police department to be open for those conversations, coming to things like this, and being open to listening, a lot of listening, because it requires us to learn the areas that we can improve upon.
Thank you. I know that one of the most successful opportunities that we've had at Alaska Literacy Program, where you've come before and spoken to us, and I appreciate that. It was several years ago. We had a police officer who volunteered to teach English classes, and she showed up, and she did it in her off time, and she's retired now. But then instead of having to call the police, we had an individual relationship connection that even we as staff felt safe to run a question by, because when you're talking about people with questionable documentation and different experiences with law enforcement. That type of relationship really went a long way to help us, even as staff, feel safe enough to navigate a problem. And you know, I mean, so I just think that there's value in those kinds of interactions, and also just in my experience with trying to navigate sometimes the relationship between several members of the immigrant community and police, there is a clearly distinct different way in which I'm treated when I interact with police and the way people that I'm supporting sometimes are treated and perceived. And I know that bias exists in all of us, and I have it, and I am guilty of bias. But it is such a delicate situation, and I know you know that. But in order for our community to be safe, and what I hear is coming out of Mountain View about not feeling like people understand what's happening there, especially with the communication when SWAT shows up and is walking through neighborhoods and stuff like that. Anything that we can do as a committee, as individual agencies, I would like to be able to help you in that process. Because this is, you know, it's really hard. It's really heartbreaking.
I appreciate that. There are two programs we are actively developing right now. One is a liaison program that's specific to officers on the department that represent a diverse group of backgrounds that can be liaison for those communities within Anchorage. And then the second program that we are developing right now is where we have a full-time officers assigned to not as just a patrol shift, and while they're working that patrol beat, but they are assigned as a job to take care of a community or a geographical area. And so both of those will be consistent employees of the police department that the community can go to, you know, address neighborhood problems. Again, one of them more from a cultural perspective and one more from a neighborhood perspective, which obviously can overlap, but two different paths to kind of help. So I will be reaching out for you or with you for some support. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Issa?
Yeah, thanks. I want to say thank you to you, because we have a refugee quarterly partners meeting that happens and APD hasn't shown up, and I can't tell you how long. And in the last meeting you were there, I know you came in a little late, but I just want to thank you for showing up, and we want to see more of that because these communities are important, and you're referencing refugee and immigrant communities and sometimes the gap. And I just want to ask a question about the process that happens after an officer involved shooting happens, especially around when you spoke about families or whoever witnesses it, the witnesses who are unfortunately in some of these instances families. And a few years ago, a refugee community had an officer involved shooting, and I spoke to that family member who felt like they weren't explained what their rights were about whether they had to go down to the police station or not. They felt like they had no choice. Is it in fact that they have no choice? What is being explained to families in that choice to participate as a witness when you just witnessed a family member potentially be shot or die? And how is that trauma informed or even quality interviewing at that point? So what is their choice, and is that being told to them in their language? I mean, this most recent shooting again is in the person didn't speak English perhaps fluently, and that has been the case in a couple other instances that I know of in the populations we serve. So what does that process look like? What choice do people have to participate or not participate as witnesses? And is there time to give them the grace to deal with the loss of their family member before that interview happens? Because for some of the people I serve, like I said, they felt like they had no choice and they were told they had to go. And they referred to it as, I was detained by the police department as a witness. And that lost you a lot of trust in those communities, I can say, for the people that I served.
So as a witness, you do not have to participate in the criminal investigation. If you ask an officer if they have an option or if you have an option to participate, I mean, the officer has to tell you the truth in that matter, because if they tell you that you do not have an option, that does become a Fourth Amendment seizure, which changes the dynamics of that contact and that information that's going to be shared. So, it's an optional, and generally, I would say that we explain that to some degree Probably doubtful that we do a good enough job explaining it in the language. However, all of the officers have access to language services on their cell phones, which I know sometimes not the best way to and by cell phone I don't mean like a Google Translate. I mean we call somebody an actual interpreter. So if there is a language barrier, that option's available to them, and there's time. There's time that night. We like to have the witnesses, if they're going to cooperate, we try to do the best we can to get them to cooperate that evening, because it becomes extremely difficult in many of our investigations to then go and find that witness again once they are out of our immediate control. So the language access we can do better on for sure, but there is an option not to participate.
All right, thank you. And Taylor?
Chair, just a note, do you want to just let folks know online? I'm not sure if they can see that the mayor joined us. You want to just make sure everyone's aware of it.
If they can see what?
That the mayor's joined the meeting.
No.
I just want to make sure that folks online are aware. Thanks.
All righty. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for being here. Let me do it that way, and so everybody will know that you are indeed here. I was going to address you momentarily, but glad to do so now. Thank you, Cameron. Taylor?
Hi, everyone, and thank you both for coming to today's meeting. I know it's really appreciated, and just the commitment to showing up and having tough conversations opens the door for improvement, and I appreciate it. I have a question related to the MIT MC team, and I feel like I read that would be part of the investigation and potential expansion over the coming years. In my day job, I'm lucky to work with a lot of vulnerable populations and have had really, really positive interactions with both Ruth and Tanya in de-escalation. And then I guess the second part of my question is, as part of that expansion, is there an opportunity for all or a majority of officers to have similar, if not as extensive, training in mental health and de-escalation?
So MIT, which is our mobile intervention team, that is an officer paired with a master's level clinician. We have 5 teams currently. They're working day shift, which is at 7 o'clock in the morning, and swing shift, which starts at 3 o'clock in the morning. So they all get off duty at 1 a.m. So between 1 a.m. and 7 a.m., those teams are not working. Doing 7 days a week, 24 hours a day with 5 teams is not possible at this point. We had a review recommendation prior to, actually right about the time we were deploying the teams in June of 2023 from Arizona State University. So we've had an external review of not just our program, but of programs that existed. So we were building our program. We wanted to try to use the lesson learned of other agencies around the country. I can tell you that we are, without a doubt, leading the country when it comes to how we use our mental health clinicians. So a review of what we're currently doing, that may happen in the future. The University of Alaska Anchorage Justice Department and Sociology Department put in for a federal grant to study the MIT program for, I believe, 5 years. They should find out if they're going to get that grant in November. So we will continuously study what that program is doing. But there's no program like it in the country, and we will continue to push the limits of what their capabilities are. Right now, they are not only responding to crisis patrol calls for service, but they are now actively being involved in criminal mental health diversion cases. So trying to divert those in crisis out of the criminal justice system and finding them appropriate mental health treatment programs. They do everything from house people to get people identification cards so that they can access their resources. There's no limitation on what our teams will do if it's within their abilities to do to try to provide assistance to those in crisis. The next step is to send them to crisis negotiator school, which is a little bit different than what they were trained to do, even though they're master's level clinicians. And their level or their involvement in calls for service that are high risk is unknown at this time. We're going to send them to that crisis negotiation training, And then we are going to determine how we can kind of roll them into those calls. We have to remember that they are not cops. They don't carry guns. They don't carry any defensive tools. And when they signed up for this job, they did not sign up to go into calls where there was an active threat. So, we have to provide them the training and things that are going to make them comfortable in doing that type of work. But we have started that process already.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions?
I'm just curious about what do you think is changing in the environment that's led to more? Is it that there's just people are in so many more crisis situations? Is it lack of defined benefit that's creating like low morale type situations? Do you have any guidance to offer us on what we could work on that would be helpful?
I think we need to go to coffee. It's a longer conversation.
Okay.
Love to have that conversation, but there's a whole host of things that contribute to kind of what's happening. One of the great things about openly communicating is you get great information, and sometimes you also get information that you may not want to hear. We had our 11th homicide in the last 24 hours in the same time frame that we've had 6 officer involved shootings. So and around the state, we've seen an increase in homicides and an increase in officer involved shootings in the last 3 or 4 months as well. So this is not a localized issue to the Anchorage Police Department or Anchorage when it comes to some more of these violent crimes. We also see that the officers that are involved in these incidents typically, more likely than not, within a year of the incident are not going to be working for the police department anymore because they have left on their own. So the impact that these incidents have on our current employees is different. And some of that is a product of how and who we're hiring. When we think about officers we're hiring today, we want to hire those employees that have a much wider range of calls for service that they can respond to. When I got hired, this job was kind of easy. We went to a call, we put handcuffs on people, we took them to jail, and we did it again. And I didn't care if they got up the same day, the next day. It was repeat day in and day out. And now we look at the activities that our police department's involved in, and our employees that we are hiring, they don't want to engage in that activity. If they arrest somebody, they want to know that the arrest matters. They want to see it prosecuted. They want to see it have the impact that an arrest would make. Likewise, they also don't want to take the person that's homeless, that's going into a grocery store and stealing a sandwich, and use the criminal justice system to try to solve that problem because they recognize it's a waste of time for everybody and it's not going to solve anything. So when you have kind of that broader perspective, you're talking about a police department that cares a whole heck of a lot more about the community than what we saw 30 years ago in law enforcement. And that also takes an impact when they get involved in significant events. So, baby deaths, homicide, suicides, officer involved shootings, these types of incidents result in a greater impact that we see in law enforcement. So that kind of impacts what's happening within the police department. I think that there's a whole host of things outside the police department from a society perspective when we talk about what's causing a recent increase in crime, because there's a whole lot of things. I mean, we can talk about fun stuff like wages and unemployment, and that's the mayor's area of expertise, right?
All righty, thank you. Any further questions before we move? All right, not seeing any other hands and all of that. I do want to say this, Chief Case, we didn't bring you up on this to present you as grilled cheese or anything like that, and but we did want to get some insight to the plan that the mayor and you rolled out, and get some questions answered and clarified and all of that. One final thing I had was relative to the statement about the advisory committee. And I guess my question relative to that would be, when can that be expected, and how many, and the composition thereof?
It's a little bit unknown. only because there's a couple different thoughts out there. The bringing back the PSAC could fit that. You know, we don't know what that's going to look like yet. I have a group of people that represent many different backgrounds that I meet with. I met with them last Friday. I meet with them in a week and a half on whatever that Friday is again. So I don't think that's what the public expects of an advisory committee that would like an open selection or different people selected from different groups within the city. So I selected those folks as advisory to me. So I can ask them questions. I can talk about the relationship that the police department has with their particular community. They can provide guidance on policies and how they'll impact their communities. So that's already in existence, but a more formalized kind of advisory committee, I think, is what some people are interested in. And what that's going to look like, I just don't have the answer quite yet, because I know that go ahead.
No, I was going to follow up on what you stated. You selected some folk to advise you personally. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Okay. And so a more broader advisory committee, publicly oriented, is what you don't have the answer for as of yet, is what I'm hearing.
Correct.
Okay. And then one quick follow up. I noticed in the public safety meeting.
Oh, I hate to interrupt. I'm sorry, but the mayor can only stay till 5:45, so I just want to
Okay.
get that out there.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Relative to yesterday's public safety committee meeting, there was the idea brought up about an oversight board, civilian oversight board kind of thing. And I sensed in your response to that there was a little what I'll call pushback to that to some degree, so to speak. And so what's really the thinking? And that can be you, mayor, or whomever. What's really the thinking relative to that? Or not?
So you're asking my opinion on a advisory civilian
I'm
oversight?
asking your thoughts.
I believe that we're premature at this moment in time. We have a new mayor, we have a new police chief. I think this looks and feels much different than anything we've ever seen before in the city, in terms of our willingness and our desire to have a police department within the community that is responsive, is open, takes input from the public. And right now, that seems like a very cooperative relationship. And my fear on civilian oversight right now is when I hear some of the folks talking about it, doesn't seem very cooperative. It seems like this is going to be an adversarial relationship, which means the effectiveness is going to be substantially diminished. And I think that, I guess my ask is, giving the mayor and myself the opportunity to kind of showcase what the ability is of this police department to work with the community.
Okay. Thank you for your input. You had anything to add to that, Madam Mayor? And thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me to join. I just wanted to add too that I'm eager to see what the third-party reviews produce in terms of recommendations, and also recognize that there's a need for conversation. As the chief said, a number of conversations, and I know that the assembly has been having some of those conversations, and we're very clear-eyed about the need to build trust and to ensure that people feel comfortable and safe calling APD. And so those, hearing that feedback from the community, getting those recommendations and continuing those conversations, I think is really important. And also, the chief hasn't been in this position very long, but already, has made progress to implement changes and to move us along. And I know that it's a more compressed timeline now, but I would also like to see those efforts continue and also take into account, the recommendations that we do get.
Okay.
You can go Panna first, but
Panna?
Yeah.
Hello. I had a question, just a consideration for the chief. With regard to the MIT, what expertise do they have in working specifically with adolescents in the community with mental health crisis?
When we hired our original 5 clinicians back in June of 2023, we tried to select clinicians with a wide range of experience. So we have specifically one of our clinicians worked in residential facility that was a juvenile residential facility. We have another clinician that did, I forget the floor in Improv that has the kind of the juvenile wing, worked on that particular floor. So we have some components of our team that have experience specifically working with minors.
Thank you. And one last question. Are these individuals working with the SROs that are connected and partnered with the Anchorage School District?
The MIT teams are available for any SRO calls or advice that they have. So I guess the answer to the question
Thank
is
you.
kind of.
Thank you.
Thea.
I just want, I know you only have a few minutes left, Mayor. I just want to kind of maybe tie a couple threads together. One is that, you know, as everyone knows, this committee's existed for the last couple of years as this kind of special committee of the Assembly. And there's been a discussion about should we move into the administration in a more should we move over there basically? And we had a special meeting. The committee supported a motion that yes, we like that idea. I'm just kind of reading what it was, but basically empowering our assembly liaisons to start that conversation with you and kind of think about that. And also, I think everyone's excited about the new chief equity officer coming in and what relationship we could have with that position. I think this committee's wanted that and hasn't had it for the last year or so. And I think, I guess, so one, just want to give you the opportunity, if you have any thoughts on that, love to hear it. We know it's super preliminary, so no one's expecting any kind of decision. But given that like possibility of moving sort of more on the administrative side, I just want to reiterate that this committee's always really wanted to be about action and implementation, because that's really where, you know, the communities that are represented here, that's where they're living, and that's what we all want to be doing. So I'm not saying that we would necessarily become like advisory to the police department, but I do think, like Lori and others have said, you know, this committee can be that kind of hub that helps you then reach out to different communities. And I guess I'm just curious to hear from the mayor, but also Chief, also you, if you have any thoughts of just like, what are your thoughts about where this committee could be? And I just want to say something that Lori said at our last meeting, which is this committee's awesome. This is a real jewel. And it's so, I think there's a real desire for that to be like, yeah, that's awesome that we have these people coming together, and let's figure out the best spot for these folks to be so that we can be as effective as we can to help support the things that we all want to make happen. So
I'll start. And I'll start by saying thank you for continuing this work and for your bias towards action as well. And that we're excited on the administration side. I'm excited about the idea of this group working with the incoming chief equity officer, you know, to look at goals, strategy, approach, what you think is important. And I think that, you know, with the work that you've been doing and the connections that you have and the insights you bring, that this is something that, again, is really exciting to us.
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity with this group, particularly with just a lot of different, you know, look at the board and see what's represented here. So for an example, one of my officers wants to get involved in teaching implicit bias class that we have at the police department right now. And so we will probably send him out to get some training. And when he comes back, you know, I could see this group as, you know, him coming in just fresh receiving the training, to kind of give an overview of what that looks like and how that's, how that's prepared. I think it magnifies how successful that training is if, when that happens, then we have a member of this body or two that go, hey, can I go with you when you teach that class at the academy or in service? Because, we're going to see elements that people, particularly in this group, just because I know who's here, can really enhance that training. The instructor can do a fabulous job teaching it and will do a fabulous job teaching it, but there's a difference when you are able to make that connection between, your experience or your community's experience with law enforcement in that type of training. So I'm open to that. We will make that happen because I think there's huge benefits to the police department.
Okay, I'm hearing the phraseology, this committee, from both of you, but I think the running discussion amongst us has been related to devolving into something else other than quote unquote this committee. The conversation has been relative to Chair Constant and others that this committee, as it is currently functioning as the Anchorage Equity Committee of the Assembly, is to be phased out and faded out, and we had discussions about becoming a steering committee that would work in conjunction, as Thea was stating, with the chief equity officer in that office and that kind of thing. And so that's what we were looking at, that interfacement and your thinking relative to that.
I'm very excited about exploring that idea. And when I said this committee, I guess, what I meant was this group of individuals who've been a part of this committee and transitioning, transforming into some other group or kind of group or structure within the administration, and working very closely with the chief equity officer. And I don't know what that might look like or what it can look like, but definitely want to have those conversations and figure it out.
Yeah, and I took this committee as the way you guys were using it, but I did want to make it plain and clear what we were really looking at and devolving into, and the ideas on that. And so I guess we would need a lot more collaboration on what that would look like and how it would come to be, and so you're amenable to that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think working together to identify some next steps would be helpful.
Okay. Taffy?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Awesome. So first, thank you very much for being here in the meeting. I was asked to voice the opinion of that, we have expertise in the room and in our community to provide that training to your staff, Officer Case, if that's what's needed. A lot of folks in this room have been doing that work for a long time, and so we offer our support and help. And then I wanted to I just want to speak to the mayor and to Officer Case. I would encourage you to think outside of the box. There has been, I think our community has gone through so much already, and the interventions and the way that we need to move needs to be different. And I embolden you and encourage you to think differently, and step out of your comfort zones, and not to allow possibilities and learning from other communities to stop you from creating better ways to move forward, and to create a better place for our community to live. And so there's a lot to say, but I hope that that you are encouraged and you are emboldened to think outside of the box and not to try and duplicate what others are doing, and think of, like, there's so many ways that we can create our own way in Anchorage. We don't have to follow what everybody else is doing, and we can mix and match what works for us and move forward as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Taffy, and thank you for all of your input. And I know, Madam Mayor, that you have to leave, but on your way out, let me say this: I want to celebrate you for your response to this latest event happening, or however we wanna frame it. I did read the remark by, I don't know if it's related to the police union or whatever, speaking on behalf of them, remark about somewhat feigned disdain about your quote unquote apology or not apology and all of that kind of thing. I like your remark, because if I would have had remarks, that would have been my thing. A multiplicity of things can be true at the same time. And to express humanity, to express compassion, in my mind, was not anything against the facts that were to come out or anything like that. And so I just wanted to appreciate that aspect of it on behalf of those who are suffering and hurting and grieving and that kind of thing. And I know sometimes it can appear to be a problem for the police department and union, that kind of thing, because they have to deal with as well the side of it that relates to morale and those kinds of things. And anytime they feel like they're not being supported and uplifted and all of that and backed, and then you get that side of it. And so I see the whole gamut of it, and it all comes together in some shape, form, or fashion. But I just want to celebrate you for that humane side and that side of compassion, not in any negativity against the police force, anything like that. And to you, Mr. Chief, I want to say we need what you guys provide. And so that goes without saying. And like I said, we didn't bring you here to grill you, but looking for a lot of answers relative to our question was along the fact of what you guys rolled out, so to speak. And you've pretty much answered those questions for us. And so thank you guys. Appreciate you. Yeah. Yeah. All righty.
Okay, now we got a new co-chairs.
Yeah, how about that? Yeah, some serious work, huh? Yeah, you get down to some serious work. All right, we need two new co-chairs, and we're gonna just go ahead, and since we've already determined that they'll be staggered going forward, maybe we need to determine the stagger. Is the one co-chair going to be for 1 year and the other one for 2 years, and gets the ball rolling like that? And so I think that's kind of what was rolled out. And so we've already decided we'll do that. So we're open for nominations for first of all, for the first part of that, the co-chair. We need a name, and then, well, we really need two, but we can start with one.
So are we
Yeah.
asking for nominations for the 1 year co-chair first?
Yes.
Okay. So the easier one first,
Easier? Okay.
because it's only 1
Yeah,
year.
yeah. Any nominations for the first co-chair, the 1 year part of this? I don't hear anybody, so maybe you need, yeah, maybe that's why maybe that's why it starts September. Yeah. So maybe we have some folk who are not present because they knew this was coming up. Yeah, 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 yeah. Not being here is a good way to get nominated.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I will make a nomination. I want to make two. I'm gonna nominate Panna for one of our co-chairs, and I would like to nominate Joan for the other.
Okay, any other?
No idea if either of you are interested.
Second.
That's a nomination, not a motion.
Yeah.
Any other nominations?
How does that work though? Do they
Yeah,
get
we
to
are we are
accept
we
it
are
or not?
casual. Yeah. Any other nominations? Well, I guess Panna, would you accept that first one?
I'm sorry, but I would have to recuse. I am recently on the board of ALP and I need to not spread myself too thin. I need to do 100% at the positions I already have. I would be happy to advise and support, but again, there's only one of me and I would be spreading myself too thin and I fear that I would be completely ineffective.
Okay, thank you, Panna.
Thank you so much. So that eliminates the one for the 1 year, and we did have Joan on the 2 year thing. Let's see here. All righty. Any other nomination for the 1 year?
Yes, this is Panna. I nominate Lori Pickett.
Okay. Okay. Yes, ma'am. I see you reaching.
Yeah, my biggest concern is that it is public as of like a week ago, but I am transitioning into retirement and I'm going to take a 6 month sabbatical. And I think that that will have me unavailable after March for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me say this. Can we move Joan to that number 1 spot? One year.
I can only commit for 1 year.
Okay, so we need someone else for the 2nd year. I would nominate Taylor.
I wasn't smart enough to think of an excuse in advance like everyone else. I will accept the nomination, but I will also nominate Taffy.
Okay. All right. Any other nominations? That was for the second. We've got nominations that we hadn't voted on any, and let's roll it out like this. Joan has stated that she would be available for 1 year, and Taylor has said that she would quote unquote do it, but she's nominating Taffy, and so we have those. Not as of yet. Taffy, do you accept?
I love that Taylor said that she can do it. And I really appreciate you, Taylor. Thank you very much for your service. And you're aware that like PCA is a monster to work on. So I want to make sure that yeah, my time is dedicated to the role that I now play for my community. Thank you.
Okay, so any other nominations? All right, we'll move the nominations close, and we've got nominated. We've got Joan nominated for the initial year, and Taylor for the 2 year term, and then we begin rotations after that. So now I entertain that motion.
I make a motion for Joan for 1 year and Toffee for, no,
Taylor.
sorry, Taylor, for the 2 year position.
All right. Any
I
questions?
second that.
Okay, I was moving fast. Any questions or discussion? All right, hearing none. Then all in favor, aye. Opposers?
Aye.
Opposers? All right, hearing none, then we have Ms. Joan will lead us beginning next month in September as one of the co-chairs, and Taylor as the co-chair, and then we'll offset by a year. And so we'll come back in, Lord willing, in our next meeting and with the wording for our charter and go forward from there. I do want to apologize on behalf of myself and my co-chairing partner for today and not getting all of the way to what we really needed to get to on today relative to the unfinished portion of our business, but we thought it very noteworthy to deal with what we did on today in view of. Yes, ma'am.
And I'd like to say, I think it would be really good to have the language access discussion when we have the new chief equity officer in. And it's my understanding her ceremony's early September. September 6th. So I think that's a critical conversation, I think, to have with her. So hopefully she will be attending these meetings.
Okay, so that would be in time for our next meeting, and so that would be awesome. Yeah. Yeah, in as much that many of us, and I know I haven't, in as much as many of us have not had a real opportunity to go through all of the information that you guys work so hard on and disseminated. So I think it would be a travesty to get into that without head knowledge of what is. Yes, sir.
Before the meeting ended, I just had a couple of quick announcements. Is it okay if I do it? I'll wait, but
We'll come even if we need to kick time in. Yes.
First of all, thank you to Joan and Taylor for being willing to take on the co-chair. And Joan looks a little scared, but it's not going to be that bad. And I'm wondering if what we could do in September after Kim takes her position, Pastor May and I and Taylor and Joan could meet together with Kim and talk about how we've kind of operated so far and how we might want to operate going forward. And I think one of the things that we're real hopeful for and we all should rally around is that if we are going to move to the administration, we could have some more staff support. And then, of course, the co-chair model gets easier. So I just want to put in that plug, and I'd be happy to try and organize that meeting if that works.
I move 5 minutes.
Okay, no opposition or
Any opposition?
no.
All right. Now, my thought on what you just stated is I think that would be a meeting would be apropos after we get some word on whether or not we're going to do this, rather than jumping into it with the assumption of.
Yeah, I guess though
exactly.
I was taking off of what Lori said, which is it kind of no matter how this committee ends up, we still really want the chief equity officer to understand the language access piece. And so it seems to me like if that's the case and we're doing that in September, we need to meet with her and kind of prep her because she doesn't really know what she's walking into. And that would be a good time for us to kind of meet as well.
Okay.
You're not into that?
Well, I like I said, I would like to have a go ahead on the direction we're moving prior to, a whole bunch of steps. Number one, and the reason why I say this, and we've moved 5 minutes, but the reason why I say this is if we're going to transition into a different type of committee, and I guess we need to understand if the whole committee is going to transition or what's going to become if we become what we talked about, a steering committee, and what would be the parameters of all of that and how we fit in if they okay us working with the chief equity officer and all of that. Right now, the mayor has said that she's open to that, but we hadn't set any parameters or what that's going to be, what that's going to look like, and what we're going to evolve into. So my thinking is that we'll be functioning as is until we come to a transition. But I see what you're saying about the language access part of it.
Because to me, that is as is. Like we were trying to work with Junior. Now we're trying to work with a new person. So whether we go there or not, if we're handling language access in September, it seems like meeting with Kim before that just to prep her on what is this committee and even like that we're kind of in transition or we don't know where we're going right now. But Cameron, was that something you wanted to speak to? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sure. So, I mean, again, I think Felix can correct me. My sense from the mayor is from her perspective, she's her term, I'm open to it, is yeah, let's do it, but I don't know what that means, right? And so I think that 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 the few things are going to have to happen. I do think that this committee is going to have to say, here's what we're hoping for. Here are the things that we'd like to see. And I think there needs to be some specificity to that. And then I think that coordination with the new chief equity officer, because this committee, steering committee as it would needs to serve the people that are a part of it. It needs to meet the needs of this committee. It needs to meet hopefully the needs of the new chief equity officer, and it needs to meet the needs of the mayor. And so I think that work can start. I think there's things that are likely going to be part of it. So however those steps are, but I think the positioning that I see the mayor and her chief of staff are in are, yeah, we're giving you a green light to move forward with giving us a recommendation for what this might look like. And that needs to be done in coordination with the chief executive officer. So that's my interpretation of it.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
So my understanding from the committee's point of view is we had a special meeting. We passed a motion that was actually pretty specific. It was, we want to be a steering committee. We want to use the charter and the structure that and the practices that we've set up. And so to me, that's sort of the voice from the committee so far. And if we were going to start talks with the chief equity officer, it would be from that point of view. She might come back and say, I'm not into that. And then we got to figure something else out. But to me, that's what the committee's kind of said so far.
That I would agree with that would be the next step is to have a conversation with the new chief equity officer.
Yeah, and my thoughts on what you just stated is that I was really not cognizant in all of that what we tied ourselves to was the current charter and all of that. I thought we were looking at whatever that whole committee would devolve into with whatever parameters those would be. But I think we do go in, and I appreciate that. I think we do go in with a lot on the table already. So, yeah.
I'm hoping it's helpful. I mean, I have the motion passed, but
yeah. Felix?
Yeah, thanks. So I just wanted to weigh in as well, just so that everyone understands the conversation that Cameron and I had. So essentially,
five more. Go ahead.
Thanks. So essentially, my perspective is that the mayor is on board with having further discussions. I think there's just definitional questions, right?
Right.
What does it mean to be a steering committee? What does funding look like? What does staffing look like? And the way that I approached the conversation with the mayor and chief of staff was that there is a foundation through the charter that the committee has worked on, and it's something that we can build on. And if there are changes or adjustments that need to be made, because it's what would work best for the chief equity officer and the Office of Equity and Justice, then those are all discussion points to be had. But to me, I feel like there is a wide opening for us to move forward with the conversation. But I think there still needs to be some discussion on specifics and definitions so that everyone can feel comfortable.
Thank you, Felix. And those are my sentiments as well. And we need some questions answered moving forward, but we'll function until at such time as we transition. And so thank you guys for your sharing on this evening, and thank you for your extra time and all of that. And I think all of our wrap up and prep stuff we've already discussed relative to the charter update and all of that we'll need to do. Thank you, Ms. Joan and Ms. Taylor. Thank you guys for your commitment to the forward thrust. Hannah?
Yeah, I just really quickly wanted to ask Joan if I could be part of the conversation as an ALP board member with you and Kim Waller. It can be via Zoom with regard to language access. In all the work that you and I and Lori did, I would like to be in a corner quietly, but I'd like to be in the room with your conversation. Is that possible? Am I being appropriate?
I have no problems unless there is like something in like.
Quite appropriate. You're part of you were part of that subcommittee, correct?
Just as a reminder, we have to follow the Open Meetings Act. So I think it's more than 3 members meeting. So if you're going to meet with Kim and it's going to be 4 of you, maybe 5 of you, I think you have to have it be an open
Lori,
meeting.
I don't think the Open Meetings Act
Open
applies.
meeting- I didn't think
You're
that-
not elected officials.
Yeah, I didn't think that applied to this. Did it?
Is it?
Yeah, we spoke to
Really?
Assembly Council about it
Wow.
when we first started.
Thank you for saying
And
that.
he said that it would be in our best interest to follow open meetings. So
Oh,
that's what we've done.
That's great. Thanks for
Oh.
thanks for letting me know. that.
Okay. So you can't have more than 3? Yeah, unless it's public notice.
And the public has to be able to attend as part of it too.
Yeah.
Okay, it
Okay,
sounds
I
like.
can just
but-
meet with
No, hang
Joan
on.
separately and give her my thoughts, and then she can carry them into the meeting.
Yeah, I think I was kind of combining 2 things. And so it sounds like if we want to prep Kim for coming and invite her to the September meeting because it's important for her to be there for language access, then it seems like that could be Panna, Joan, Lori, because you worked on the project. And if we want to talk to Kim separately about if she's going to participate in this committee and who we are and blah, 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 then it could be the new co-chairs and Kim, and I guess we could public notice it. Silly, but.
Does Kim make 4?
Well, if we had 4 co-chairs, that would
No.
be.
Kim would not be appointed or elected to anything. She's
If there were
staff.
4 co-chairs.
Yeah, no, Kim.
Oh,
would
I
be
see. You mean for
four.
them to talk about.
Kim
language.
Waller.
Yeah, I'm talking about the open meeting.
No, 3 of them could meet with Kim and it'd be fine.
Okay, that was my question. So so you subcommittee members could meet with her, relative to language access. Yes.
Thank you.
Oops, sorry. We can do that. We can meet you, Lori, and I with her, talking to her specifically on this subject. If that works.
Excellent. Works for
Right.
me.
Awesome.
Pastor, before you close, can I just say one thing really quick?
Go ahead.
And that is that can we also give a huge thank you to Pastor May and to
Oh
Thea
man, come
for
on.
their incredible leadership
Come
for the
on.
past couple of
Appreciate-
years.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
It's been
Appreciate
an
you.
amazing time. You guys have done an
Thank
incredible
you.
job.
I'm
Thank you.
getting untethered and unburdened already.
Your founding co-chairs.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. And one last thing I had on what we were just discussing is this, that if we need to maybe schedule a time in this transitional thing, even if we had to do it openly or whatever, these co-chairs with the new co-chairs coming in, maybe have a tete-a-tete, even if we wanted to do that, as you suggested, with the chief equity officer or whatever, even if we had to notice it.
Right.
We can do
Yeah.
that because we don't have any secrets.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we can still do that
Good.
and cover those bases as well. All right. Thank you guys so much. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.